your guide to the truth. TheNewAmericanMedia.com.
Yeah. Broadcasting to you live from the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, planet Earth, North America, the United States of America. California is the state, Los Angeles the city. Saturday the day, May 9th, 2015. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Agree to Disagree here at the TNAM Radio Network. My name is Brian Engelman and I'm going to be your host. Thank you so much. We have now gone 4 years of shows. I want to thank each and every one of you as we have been doing this. And I want to remind you that it's only just begun. Things are ramping up. I know you can feel it. You look around at you got volcanoes bursting all over the globe. You got earthquakes popping off in places you don't normally have 4.0s. You have civil unrest. You saw the Tea Party put 600,000 people on in the backyard of government and said, hey, you guys better listen. You guys better start working for us. You saw Occupy Wall Street. You saw everything going on in Ferguson and Baltimore. So if you don't feel that there are important things on the horizon, maybe you're not paying attention. And it's our job to kind of help bring that to your attention. One of the ways is we do a sports show. It's called The Unhappy Hour. I'm a Cavs fan. Bulls won on a last-second shot yesterday. Cavs trail 1-2. And I think we have a good chance to win it and tie it 2-2 headed back to Cleveland. Now, I do that show, one, because it's my version of bread and circuses. It is what I like. I grew up in Ohio, and I'm a big Indians, Cavs, and Browns, and Buckeye fan. But I also invite you over to check out this political show that we do. Kind of the only thing more useless to me than a Republican right now is a Democrat. I'm much more libertarian, and I don't think that there's really much of a difference between the Republican and Democrat parties. Seriously, next election, 2016, what do you want? Vote for Bush or vote for Clinton? Are we in a bad dream? All right. I'm just saying. Check it out. I want you to get connected with us on all various forms of social media. Here's how you do it. Go to thenewamericanmedia.com. That's our homepage. On the right-hand side, it says TNAM Radio. And that's where you click play to listen live. When do we go live? We go live when we feel like going live, when we're able to, when we can work in to all of the scheduling, the perfect time that works during that stretch. And we go. So what we'll do is we'll send a message out on Twitter. We're at American_media_. Make sure that you go over there and follow us on Twitter. And we'll send that message out there along with the link where you can click play and listen live. Also put it on Facebook, so you can do a search for The New American Media with spaces in between and like the Facebook page. But once again, Twitter, Facebook, and how you listen to the show live, where is that? That's all at thenewamericanmedia.com. That's the hub. That's where you come into. That's where you go out. Finally, though, coming up on 500,000 video views, we have our YouTube channel. So youtube.com/thenewamericanmedia. So stay connected and check out all of that content. I want to bring you somebody now who has connected with us via Solutions Institute. And I'll bring Ford in, and I'll let him kind of explain what Solutions Institute is all about. But really, all you have to do is take a look at the last, month or two of the shows that we've been doing, and we're trying to get to know some of these people a little bit better. There's a lot of activists that are trying to team up and help each other make the world a great place and help us correct injustices when we see them across the globe. You really don't have to look much further than your own backyard these days to see something horrible that happened in your state in the past year or two. South Carolina, Ohio, Missouri, New York, California, Texas, New Mexico. Just think of all the killings, the things that you've seen on video, the horrible situations. But Ford is connected as a media relations and event video advisor. So what we're going to do is we'll bring him out of the program, and we're going to have a conversation and get to know Ford a little bit. Because he was over there in Baltimore, and he has some stories to tell. Some stories we won't tell. Well, I'll let him explain.
Hello?
Hello, Ford. It's Brian Engelman, and you are live on Agree to Disagree. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And what I did, and I don't know when I started this, whether it was Alex Freeman or Bobby Rodrigo, Issa Hodge. I'm kind of Justin King. I'm trying to go through our entire roster of Solutions Institute and talk with these guys about current events. But recently in one of these shows, I brought him in, whoever the guest was, and I kind of read their bio on the air with them, and that's what I wanted to do with you, because we kind of have this real-time explanation of what's going on here, and we let the conversation roll. So, Ford,
Sure.
welcome to the show, and I'm going to read about you off of solutions-institute.org, and that's where I encourage everybody to go. You can get more information about Ford, how you can connect with him that way. But here goes. Ford Fischer is an American journalist and the executive producer and managing editor of news2share.com. That's news, the number 2share.com. His work has been featured on a number of large networks on a variety of topics, from politics and activism to culture and international conflict. News to Share, which he co-founded with journalist Trey Yingst, is a platform for people around the world to contribute newsworthy footage from anywhere in the world and have it seen by major news media. Fischer's and his site's footage has been seen on Fox, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, The New York Times, The Washington Post, countless other networks, etc. And Ford works with Solutions Institute. He's available to discuss video work, footage, if you'd like to contribute footage or request his personal coverage of an event, etc., etc. And he's available for media comment on how the news media shapes political thinking, cybersecurity and hacktivism news in the digital age, and activist culture online and offline. So, after all of that, once again, welcome back, Ford Fischer.
That was a pretty comprehensive review of who I am and what I do. I think you got everything there.
All right, everybody, we're done. I'll see you next week. We're going to be hopefully talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers win. Maybe they'll be moving on, game 3 or 4. All right, everybody, see you later. Peace. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, I had to cue up the music. I was a little long-winded there. Okay, so Ford, thank you for coming. I mean, obviously, I'm going to start with the elephant in the room. You recently covered a situation in Baltimore, as we've all been following. Freddie Gray has passed away. 6 officers have now been charged. 3 of those being African-American, 1 woman, I believe, off the top of my head. A whole bunch of stuff. Ford, you were there.
Right.
And there's a certain parameter of this story we want to discuss and a certain parameter we're just not going to get to yet. And I'm going to kind of let you walk me through this, since I just want to make sure we approach it the correct way, if that makes sense. Because it's an elephant in the room. We're not going to pretend it didn't happen, but I want you to present it the right way.
I'm totally understood. So we'll sort of starting at the end, basically, which is I've been covering Baltimore for the last 2 weeks for News to Share, and that coverage has been both for publication to our own viewers as well as sending content to other networks. So our content from Baltimore has been used by ABC, CNN, and NBC just in the last 2 weeks. On Saturday, I guess exactly a week ago, basically now, I was detained. A lot of people have been incorrectly using the word arrested, but the word detained technically, while filming outside of the designated media zone, although media is exempt. That video can be found on News to Share, and it sort of speaks to itself. But to give a very brief overview, and these are all details that you can find on the video, basically at 10 p.m. marks the beginning of the curfew in Baltimore, and this was actually the last night that they were imposing it, but they were imposing this curfew from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m., believing that would stop violence from happening. And my personal experience, both on that night and on previous nights, is that really people were in part out there just to prove that they weren't going to comply with it, and the police had an excuse to consider everybody on the streets a criminal starting at 10 p.m., and so in some ways,
that's a rough spot, man.
More violence.
That is a rough spot to be in. That is an, but when a weapon is drawn, there is a necessary, there's this escalation of conflict. That was actually one of my quick questions. Are you armed out there in any way to defend yourself? Is our God-given right to the Second Amendment allows you to do?
So I'll plead the fifth in terms of my own personal armament. But I'll point out that Maryland has what many would consider draconian gun and knife laws, and they very high, and Baltimore specifically is highly restrictive on knives. So I certainly wouldn't carry anything that would be considered outside of regulation. But to the average listener, whomever, that basically means nobody's allowed to carry anything that they could defend themselves with.
See, I find that absolutely crazy, Ford. Because I went out there to Bundy Ranch, and that was where you had people. Oh, they had snipers up in the mountain ranges. It had, you had militia members there. You had oath keepers there. You had the BLM with full-on, it looked like a war was breaking out. You had somebody up on the overpass with a sniper rifle aiming it through like the crack in two of the concrete dividers of the freeway. It was intense as hell, and it just, I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment. And the fact that there are big urban areas that think they can tell people, well, you know what, in our place, you don't have the right to defend yourself. I don't know how our country got to this point, from making the Second Amendment the second most important thing, to people banning the right for your mother or your sister or your fiance or your grandmother from defending themselves if they ever ran into someone that wanted to kill them or steal from them, attack them, rape them. I just find it ridiculous, because when journalists go out there, how protected are we really? That's a problem.
Right. So there's sort of more of an emphasis on, and of course, if you're carrying a gun or a knife or something, you're expecting to use those things defensively, but there's more of an emphasis on defensive or reparative gear, such as helmets, face masks, gas masks, body armor, and things like that. And generally speaking, journalists are less inclined to do anything that would make them seem adversarial to the police, and they shouldn't be. So journalists, generally speaking, should try to be observers that are not in any way affecting the actual outcome of what they are filming. And if it happens that police change what they are doing based on the fact that they are filmed, then all the better. They're probably going to act better on camera rather than worse in most cases. But generally, you want to be an unbiased observer. So that tends to mean suiting up with helmets and things like that if it's necessary. Regarding weapons in Baltimore, just on the part of protesters and things like that, what I think is interesting there, and where you really see that stuff, is that protesters ended up finding all kinds of, I would say, almost strange improvised weapons. On the second night that I was there, I guess about 2 weeks ago today, there were protesters who were actually pulling bricks out of the ground to either hold in their hand and smash things with, or even to hold in their hand and defend themselves with if someone were to, in the craziness of this, come at them, or to throw through windows. So, of course, sometimes they're using that not in a defensive way at all. But, baseball bats were not uncommon. Some people did have knives that would probably have been considered outside of what was in the realm of allowance. So of course, you have people who aren't even complying with these laws. But it definitely creates a strange dynamic in that sense, where people are either using alternatives to traditional weapons or they're using traditional weapons at their own risk.
Man, yeah, it's really tricky. And then you touched on something else that's tricky is, where I'm coming from, and I'm going to try to condense a very complicated set of circumstances into about 30, maybe 60 seconds here. So bear with me, but. When it comes to these situations, I think Kelly Thomas in Fullerton, California, was murdered on camera from a police officer that put on latex gloves and said, "See these fists? They're getting ready to F you up."
Right.
I saw Eric Garner get brought down in a chokehold. Yes, he said, I'm not going today. I'm not complying today. I'm making my stand right here. I'm not going to allow you to do this to me again. Yes, he had his hands up, and he's a big dude, but he made it clear they weren't going to comply. It was unfortunate across the board, and I thought that the police officer should have been sanctioned in some sort of way, because apparently the chokehold is something you're not supposed to be using as your general protocol. I thought Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman was attacked based on the evidence I was able to obtain, and I think if attacked, anyone has the right to self-defense. Mike Brown, I saw him with a strong arm robbery. All the reports said that he was walking in the middle of the street looking for a conflict. Cops said, get the F out of the street. He came over. There was an altercation. The cop actually discharged his weapon inside of the car, and the guy ran back at him. I thought that Mike Brown situation was that. Tamir Rice in Cleveland, that cop came up and in 2 seconds blew him away, just like John Crawford down in Walmart down in Beaver Creek, Ohio, an area. I've been to that Walmart. He was playing around with an air rifle off of their shelves, and he was killed. They came in. There was no opportunity to talk the situation down. It was just instant escalation. Then Freddie Gray, I don't know. I'm still trying to gather information here. I'm learning about the case. I try not to jump to really rash conclusions off the bat because as you gather evidence, that can change. But here's for me where I wanted to bring the question in, Ford, is what I think has come out of this conversation is something that perhaps is the best opportunity for us to always have journalists on hand for these police encounters to protect the Darren Wilsons, who in my opinion, based on the evidence, I don't see what he did wrong, based on the evidence that I've seen, versus, you know, someone like in South Carolina, the guy, Walter Scott, that was running away from the police, and he was shot, 8 times, and 5 of them hit him, and the last one killed him. Unless he had a weapon running into a library to take hostages, you have no legal right as a police officer to shoot somebody in the back. Regardless of anything that happened, you have no right. That guy's going to be charged with murder now. He's lost his job, as he should have. He needs to go to trial because, thank God, we had a camera. So that's what I'm getting at, Ford, is I am strongly in support on body cameras that cannot be turned off under any circumstances for all of our paid employees, those being the police officers. Based on what you saw in Baltimore and what you've seen over the past couple of years, where do you stand on that issue?
So it's a good question, and I think that I'd point out that the incidents, like you said, a lot of the objection to body cameras tends to be that in some way it would hurt the police or impede them from doing their jobs. And I think the fact is that for the cops that are doing the right stuff, you know, they should be excited to have those things recorded
as protections for themselves.
They're right. It is protection, and I think that, for example, you know, I wouldn't. I personally cannot comment because I don't know enough about it, and I don't think anybody does. Specifically, the Darren Wilson and George Zimmerman, for example. But both of those cases would be exceedingly clear-cut one way or another if it was caught on video. I think that the problem is that there's all this ambiguity. And I think that all of those problems would be a lot easier to solve where basically, you know, first of all, cops would act better if they were on camera, but also the cops that don't act well, there would be so much greater of a level of accountability. In the interim, when we know that we have a city that is occupied by the National Guard or the St. Louis Police Department or whatever it is, that is when I think there is an obligation of journalists to take that role. And you know, body cameras are perfect because they are actually first person attached to the cop. You know, the camera doesn't have to catch up to the cop if the cop's running really fast.
And that's something
in
that's something in your video. I was kind of in your video, one of the things that became apparent to me was, all the journalists that are out there, are they fit and in shape? Are they doing their cardio? Is it okay for them to just kind of bolt down a few different city blocks while their adrenaline's already pumping and you have weapons of war rolling through the streets and armed people everywhere and you feel like you're in the middle of a bad game of laser tag on an acid trip where like, I mean, just watching that, how was it for you running down there? I'm sorry to take you off, I'd steer you off of what you're saying there, that you have the first person, but that's what struck me is, yes, the body camera's attached to a vest or something on a cop, and that's going to give you a limited amount of range. You're going to see the close, from his perspective, his or her perspective. But when you're an outsider, you get to see how the situation puts itself together. It's seeing the forest for the trees. You know, stare at one big tree or step back a few miles and go, oh, wow, look at that. That's neat.
Right.
How surprised were you that you had to kind of think of journalism as a track and field meet?
Yeah, so I would say that was probably the video that you're referring to that leads up to what happens to me is probably a little bit more unusual in that was a pretty long chase.
It really was. It was intense. It was like a Bruce Willis movie or something. I was like, dude, you gotta go get him before the ticking clock goes to 00. Get him, Ford.
The bizarre thing about it, though, is that
it was really bizarre.
It was a chase when they actually kind of had their target in eyesight and actually thought they could get him. They took a break, sort of, on an intersection, and then a National Guard truck comes over, and then he says, "Oh, blue shirt," and he points over at the guy. He still has this guy in eyesight, but then just starts having a conversation with the fellow guys until he sees that one. What I think it shows is that a lot of the arrests going on here are sort of, there are so many different protesters that are outside, and in some way it's almost like a token of where they're trying to, okay, let's round up as many as we can and the worst ones that we can, which in theory, if you're rounding up ones that are doing actual violence, that's probably what they should be doing. But it's interesting because as opposed to some other situation where you have one criminal in a police chase and you virtually never give up, in a riot setting, it's like, okay, well, we'll settle for the worst ones, kind of as many as possible, and while at the same time exerting the least amount of effort required to do it. If someone throws a brick at somebody in normal life, then and that turns into a police chase, you're not going to stop chasing them after 2 blocks. But
right.
But in a protest setting, you might.
Yeah, it's one of those cat and mouse games. How close can you get without getting gotten? It's right. And you see that, and that's one of the a different camera angle. And I don't know if are you a football fan, Ford Fischer?
A little bit. I'm kind of a once a year football fan. I'm like Super Bowl kind of person.
Fair enough. Yeah, for the pomp and circumstance of it, less than. Yeah, I gotcha. See, I'm the opposite. I follow all Indians, Cavs, Browns, and Buckeyes, and right. I haven't had a single championship to celebrate in my lifetime. So times 3 sports, that gets very depressing. Anyway, I digress. But something about when I go to football games, I remember I went to an Arizona Cardinals game against the Browns in Cleveland, and I was way high up. I mean, these seats were like 3rd row from the top. It kind of reminds me when I saw Muse in Los Angeles. I was like, well, Hey, it's awesome. And it was cool to see all the people on the floor bouncing together. No one's going to take us alive. Time has come to make this right. You and I must fight for our lives. You and I must fight to survive. I like Muse. But you can see a football game differently when you're way up, and you get different perspective, and mm-hmm. And when you watch these videos of the mob, it's like you can see it's really kind of like an insect or a National Geographic kind of hunt kind of thing that's going on. It's like you have people that will go up and push it as far as they can, and they're the super risk takers. And then you have people on the outside fringes, and they kind of go in a wave. When they think they have power, they charge. Then they back off and fan out. It's really interesting, the art of understanding a riot, a mob scene. Did you ever feel in danger out there, or was it constantly feeling in danger, or just being hyper alert? How would you describe that mindset?
So as I said, I was there a total of 4 nights, the Friday and Saturday of sort of the when it began, and then the Friday and Saturday a week ago. And
where do the nights? What happens at night? Do you go into a van or something, or do you go to a hotel? How do you?
So we live we're based out of Washington D.C. So we actually travel back to D.C. when it's died down for the night. Okay, gotcha. The 2 nights that were I would say dangerous, or actually the primary night that was dangerous was two weeks ago today, and that was basically when you had a very large, organized, peaceful march that happened in the afternoon, and it had approximately 3,000 people was the typical estimate that people gave. And the people who organized it had all of the formal organized activities stop at like 5 o'clock. And people don't just disperse at that point. It doesn't just end. So from there, you had people who kind of had makeshift leaders, and people start getting a little bit more riled up. In the beginning, you had it led by very sort of sophisticated men wearing, suits that were trying to exemplify peace, nonviolence.
That would be like members of clergy, right? Like some
Right,
pastors
exactly.
and such.
So, but then you have everybody shifts out at 5 o'clock, and then it became, first of all, a lot more physically faster. People start actually running in mobs as opposed to walking. So literally just the lack of, there's like a structure difference that causes it to be more chaotic. But the moment that really made it crazy was that it intersected with and you're a sports fan, so the Baltimore Orioles game that was happening that day. They get to the baseball park, and all of these riot cops appear who basically seem to be defending just the baseball park. Like, that's the primary target that they wanted to make sure stayed absolutely safe. And then a fight broke out between protesters and normal pedestrians at a bar that was right near it, like a sports bar.
I saw people from the mob throwing trash cans at people, and then I saw one guy get dragged in. There was like a one-on-one person fight, and then like 6 protesters came in with a bunch of cheap shots. And they're not protesters, they're rioters at that point.
Right.
And they come in, and now one guy got hit, and then they get swarmed by 8 with a couple of kicks, couple of punches, like kind of tore through the city like a bunch of locusts, you know?
Oh, it was insane being right next to it, because I was filming so there was this moment where one of the barricades fell over, and two people are like punching each other, and one ends up on the ground, and there's another person who runs, and I didn't even notice this when we first took it, but then myself and my co-producer Trey Yanks looked back at it after. There's another person who just runs into this fight that's happening, and he trips over the barricade and just lands face first in the ground. So, and without having punched or been punched by anybody. So this is just so chaotic that you actually have people just like tripping over things and like eating shit, and it's just part of the.
They're literally knocking themselves out.
On.
It's so crazy that dude just knocked himself out.
Right. Oh, it was so, and that wasn't unusual. There were a lot of, when you get into this kind of chaos where you have so much, I guess, excitement that there's no kind of individual standard for peace or order or whatever it is, then people just start doing things that you would just consider completely unusual and you would never be prepared to do in real life, such as picking up trash cans and throwing them through glass windows.
Yeah, I've lived a pretty healthy life for it. I've gotten out there, I've moved around, seen different things, been places. I've never had the occasion to pick up some sort of trash can to throw it through a window or at a human being yet. I don't know, maybe I just haven't lived enough. But yeah, that's not my skill set.
It's just not a thing, and I'm pretty sure that most of them, that was probably their first time doing that. I mean,
it was a public deflowering. Yeah, they all, it was their first time. Okay, got it. This is neat. You guys should try it.
Correct. They gave up their
innocence.
Trash can through window virginity.
Yes, they gave up their innocence. It was their prom night.
Right. So it broke. Right. So that basically happened, and it was interesting because that began the looting in a tiny smidgen sense, where at that bar, as they're destroying this bar, there were like outdoor coolers of beer and Gatorade and stuff, and they actually started taking that. They're destroying the whole bar, but at the same time, there's like the one guy who's kind of just quietly taking Gatorade, oh, thanks for the drinks, and running off.
Like a marathon. It's like that's our little relief station. No, I saw that one meme. I don't know if you saw the one, but it's a dude in the Baltimore riot, and he has he's holding his hand up in triumph, and he has like a bag of paper towels, and he has like a CVS bag full of I don't know, chips and stuff. And the meme says something like, "Solved inequities, racism, and police brutality." How the hell does that thing go? And still found time to get my shopping done, or something like that. And it's just so ridiculous, because setting a CVS on fire is not about liberty and freedom. It's really about a crazy opportunistic chance to kind of let out your real life version of The Purge. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, I've seen both of them. Fun fact, I saw The Purge Anarchy 2 weeks before it came out. I actually went to like critic screening.
Oh, nice. You do that stuff too?
So that's just a symptom of being in Washington D.C. and kind of in the like journalism world. Yeah, I mean I don't do movie reviews or anything like that, but I've seized an opportunity to see a movie I wanted to see.
Well, let me take a chance to pimp one. Someone that I know, his name is Nick Cavalier. He just did this movie called Forced Perspective. I just got to see the screening of it in Beverly Hills a couple weeks ago, and it took home the prize for best cinematography. There's something that you guys should check out if you haven't. The artist is named Derek Hess, and he's a Cleveland artist. He has his artwork in the Louvre and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he's one of the most widely recognized rock journalists. Artists, I would just say, because he's a painter and a sketcher and stuff like that. But yeah, that was really great. I'm just going to put it out there. It's called Forced Perspective by Nick Cavalier, and check out the artist, Derek Hess. His stuff is incredible. Anyway, I got off on a totally weird tangent there, but I digress. So, yeah, what is happening, it is very loosely affiliated with trying to get justice for Freddie Gray. It turns into a screening of The Purge. Did you feel like a lot of the people that were committing the acts that you were watching, did you feel like it was more as an act of protest against an unjust system, or just joining the mob to see what it was like, see what you could get away with, maybe grab a pair of sneakers, let out a little bit of frustration, and then go back home? What did it feel like to you?
Sure. So I think that there was a real diversity, probably inappropriate way to use the word, among the intellectual kind of reasons for participating and how they participated in this protest. I do maintain that it really was a minority, not a tiny minority. It wasn't insignificant at all, and they did the most damage. But it was a minority of the people participating in all of this stuff that actually were burning businesses to the ground and breaking windows and things like that. The Saturday that I was there, that sort of inflamed all of the protests, inflamed, no pun intended. They had
too soon. No, that was good.
Like I said, they had about 3,000 people at the march that was actually organized during the day. When I ultimately stuck with the largest strand of protesters throughout the entire evening and into the night, and what we ultimately filmed, which basically no other network could really access and run around with, was a really up close look at all of these guys as they separate, and then start raving through the 7-Eleven and cell phone stores and things like that. And by that point, those people who were doing the thefts, the looting, the breaking of things and stuff, there's probably about 200 of them left doing that kind of stuff. And it's kind of hard to estimate for the rest of the nights how many are participating in violence and things like that. But I would say that it's probably a good estimate that, of the people that are out there, probably about 5% are participating in violence. But the problem is that when you've got, a person with a sign who's really trying to have their voice heard, it does take well more than 20 of them to make the same impact as somebody who's going to light up a bottle of liquor and throw it into a drugstore.
I know, it's if it bleeds, it leads. That's unfortunately how journalism has been since yellow journalism, since Samuel Adams and the Boston Massacre. That was, hardly a massacre if you were to say that word today. Certainly not even a Texas Chainsaw Massacre at that. But no, you're right. I think watching some of this video and knowing that you were in a place that Geraldo Rivera and Anderson Cooper probably weren't. And who's the guy from CNN? What's that guy's name? You know who I'm talking about.
Don
Lemon?
There's several. Anderson Cooper, Don Lemon.
Yeah, he's the one. He's the guy. He's the one I was
thinking
of.
Yeah, no, that was Don Lemon?
I think so. But these guys are not running through the crowd with them like you were. And that's kind of a difference, to actually see that side of things. And let me just take this chance, since we're kind of getting into things here. Tell everybody where they can check out these videos and your subsequent stories, any stuff. Where's the best place to find out more about you, stay connected in your social media network, and kind of link up for the stuff you guys cover next?
Right. So to get kind of all of our stuff in one spot, what you could do is actually Google our name, which is News2, which is the number 2, share. And you'll end up seeing our YouTube, our website, our Twitter, and everything like that. The website itself is news2share.com, and our Twitter is news_2_share. Working on getting rid of the underscores. If we can commandeer the Twitter account that has the ideal handle, which would just be @news2share. But
be like, dude, send him a direct message like, dude, I'll buy you a pizza. You want a pizza? Dude, I'll get you a pizza and I'll send an Uber to your house. Take it wherever you want to go.
They haven't tweeted since like the beginning of Twitter, which is the problem anyway. I mean,
so what if can accounts go inactive, or can they?
Yeah,
can they be
we're
suspended?
working on it with Twitter. We'll probably get it, but at the moment @news_2_share, and then on Facebook it's just News2share. Again, the number 2. When the reason it's called News2share, by the way, is that if you are a witness to breaking news of some kind and you've captured video or photo, you can actually go to our website and click on submissions, and you can actually send us your video. The premise of our whole site and brand is that we want to have news that's really kind of from the first person. You know, network news tends to get to something last, right? They hear about something, then they travel to it, so they don't capture the actual car crash or shooting or whatever. In the case of all the looting and protesting, they're scared to be in there. They can't run around with their big cameras, so they're taking shots from helicopters, and everybody looks like ants and everything. Our image is that we want news, like a news cycle that is driven by people on the ground, whether that's people like myself or Trey who are actual journalists, or even just people who encounter something that's breaking and manage to film it on their cell phone. Nowadays, technology allows anybody to basically show what the news is.
You know what? I'm really glad we've kind of introduced ourselves a little bit forward, because that's the premise of the new American media, in the respect that the old American media has failed us. We have to get the news that we see current and local, and we cover what we can, and we become the news. On our business cards it says citizen journalist, because everybody that gets a business card, everybody that's in the world, if you have a camera, you are the new American media. You have to do the job that the propaganda artists don't want you to do. And the more of us that there are, the tougher it is for them to lie. That's why you've seen so many just snafus in our foreign policy with Syria and Libya and Iran and Afghanistan and Iraq, and it's just because they can't push the lies that they used to be able to get away with. People are catching on that the official story isn't quite the real story. So I definitely want to talk with you a little bit some more, probably after the interview, about News2share, because that is exactly what I think is needed at this time, perhaps more than ever. Because I think the toys and capabilities that bad guys could have are so vast and powerful that this is almost our only way of peacefully asserting ourselves and our authority and our power back into the situation to get control of it. It's kind of do you also view the media, maybe, and technology specifically, as a double-edged sword that's being used against us, but it's also our greatest weapon?
Sure. I think that you have flashier projects coming from basically anywhere, and you have more people enabled to do anything. In a way, it's a form of democracy. That you have some occurrence that happens. If you have one reporter who then starts saying, "Oh, we just saw somebody get shot in the back," and by the way, this did happen in Baltimore. You had a Fox News reporter saying, "We just witnessed with our own eyes somebody being shot in the back by police." And then other people start looking at their cell phones and saying, that's not what I saw. And it creates accountability. So I do think that, when you have flashier, more live media from people who may not necessarily know exactly what happened or may have an interest in telling you something in a different way, having more people with the same abilities democratizes the ability to create accountability for all of those sorts of things. And I would note that even, adversaries like ISIS, for example, are using Avid Live Editor. They're using very high-end editing software to create their propaganda. And And meanwhile, and I'm not going to make some kind of official statement here to the effect of, oh, the FBI is using propaganda or something like that, but even the FBI is producing films. I recently watched a half-hour-long film that actually listed the FBI as the producer of it about, it was a narrative film, but it was based on a true story of somebody who basically sold information to China, like a young guy who went to China and was selling FBI insider information. So they made this film about how they caught him and everything. The point is that, our governments across the world, terrorists across the world, anybody, are really using video nowadays. And so when somebody themselves uses video, they can provide their side of what happened. And the more objective that video is, the more powerful it can be. I really value using raw footage rather than something with tons of flashy titles and everything like that, because I think that it tells the story best. You can use titles, you can use text, you can use narration to kind of provide the context for what you're looking at. But I think that we live in a news cycle where people are starting to be more aware of what editing means, and seeing something really raw and just seeing it the way that an observer would see it is starting to make a greater impact.
Yeah, absolutely. When something's so slick, you click on Facebook or something, check out this guy's trick shot, and it's somebody taking a basketball and bouncing it off a 7-story, library on his college campus. You're like, no way! He swished it right through the hoop off of the roof. It's like a lot of people, anytime you see things now, you go, this is too slick, I think it's fake. I think it's CGI.
Right.
He didn't really do that. It's like you see a Sprite commercial. Wait a minute, you've reenacted some of those things I've seen online. One of them's fake. But to kind of follow up on what you were talking about here, Operation Mockingbird, for the people that aren't familiar, the backstory here, because this is not a new thing in 2015. That's something we all need to keep in mind. But Operation Mockingbird was a secret campaign by the United States Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, to influence media. Begun in the 1950s, it was initially organized by Cord Meyer and Alan Dulles, and was later led by Frank Wisner after Dulles became head of the CIA. And then he got his airport. The organization recruited leading American journalists into a network to help present the CIA's views, and funded some student and cultural organizations and magazines as fronts. As it developed, it also worked to influence foreign media and political campaigns, in addition to activities by other operating units of the CIA. So, la-di-freaking-da. This is nothing new. They just have more toys to play with right now. And what happens when we all have a device in our hand, we can instantly sniff out, root out, and call out the bullshit as soon as we notice it, and they can't continue their lie. And it stops them dead in their tracks. And I think that's just an amazing opportunity that we have to level the playing field, because these guys are still our employees. People think like, they're the bad, I'll get in trouble if they work for us. This is our system. That's what this was set up as. I guess, Ford, are you optimistic? Are you? How do you see this playing out? Because at least on my side, I see it headed toward at least the attempt for some sort of horrible hybrid of martial law, police state, new world order, one world government type thing, and or a civil war, revolutionary war, and world war all at the same time. I just kind of see this converging along racial lines and ethnic lines, religious lines, socioeconomic lines. Everything's just fragmenting all across the globe, and I feel like it's headed towards something. Are you as apocalyptic as me, and are you optimistic or pessimistic toward the not too distant future?
So I think that you tackled a lot of stuff there that I think is probably your place to tackle, given your forte, but probably not so much mine. I'm a journalist who's supposed to say what's happening right now and what has happened. I think that I can leave it to experts to say what exactly is going to happen going forward. But what I think that journalism can do going forward is that it can make sure that whatever happens is happening in an informed or purposeful way. So I'm not going to suggest to you that a civil war is coming soon, but that if a civil war, if an uprising, or if a protest, this is a protest is many of these people are using revolutionary language. You do have
Very
a lot
much
of
so.
people who are very upset, and they'll use words like revolution. And you actually have, a lot of independent newspapers. Usually they act kind of stealthy, but you have people in these protests, and I've seen this in D.C., I've seen it in Baltimore, it was happening in Ferguson, I even saw it in Boston. I was back in Massachusetts and filmed a protest in Boston in Christmas, and it happened here. You have independent newspapers such as the Revolutionary Communist Party of the United States and, various socialist newspapers, and I'm certainly not endorsing their opinions at all, but those types of media and that kind of thing, they hand those things out to the people who are already out on the streets there protesting, and they kind of quietly advocate for, revolutionary action. So would that kind of thing ever happen? I'm not sure. I'm also not sure that it would look like what we think of when we think of a civil war or revolution. But if those things happened, they could happen in a way that was informed by reality. If people are gonna have a revolution over Freddie Gray, if people are gonna protest over Freddie Gray, that kind of thing could be a lot more informed if you actually had really good beginning to end footage of what happened to him. In a way, Ferguson, if your opinion is correct, which is that Darren Wilson was basically innocent or whatever, that the whole
it wasn't as much my opinion as my summation based on all of the available evidence after I could account for the guy saying he charged at him, reading the ballistics report that the gun was discharged inside the vehicle, watching the footage. It's not just one thing or another. I think a lot of people go, oh, he's white, so he's bad, he did it, or he's white, he's innocent. They are always, and both sides say the other side's always up to something. But yeah, less of an opinion, more of a summation based on as many facts as I could take. Now if I have to pick, it kind of seems like this dude's life was ruined. It's tragic that Michael Brown was killed, and I don't really understand how somebody high on marijuana walks down the middle of a road and wants to pick a fight. That sounds like PCP or meth. Like something's off about this story, and I can't finish putting it together, but I don't have all the information, and sadly, I don't think I ever will in that.
Right. So my point basically was, and I think that addressed it well, which is that people don't know exactly what happened, and so therefore they take sides, but not necessarily with the greatest level of information that they could. If all of those people could, have read information, many of them are still upset in Ferguson, and all the protests in Ferguson still happened absent that synthesis of information. All of that would not have happened if there was a video that was very clear that showed beginning to end that there wasn't something to be upset about. If there was a video that showed beginning to end that something that shows that he is guilty, then either you would have all these people go out there and say, we truly are justified in what we're doing right now, or you would have the government saying, oh, wait, well, I guess he really was guilty, and then they do something about it and prevents that from happening. So I think that looking forward, as all this technology becomes more and more available and more quick and live, you have such a greater level of accountability that essentially it pushes us closer to the truth. And I won't try to, and that's sort of a philosophical notion, and I'm not sure that I can say what that truth is, but people can be more informed as we get into that kind of society. I would point out specifically, live streaming is becoming incredibly popular at protests, and I'm sure we'll never have police body cams being live streamed, because that probably would be dangerous in some senses.
Yeah, and I think you're right on that. I think it should all go to something that has no police official has jurisdiction over. Something that's set up where it's almost like the data gets sequestered, so nobody can erase or mess with any of it, and you're not going to release the private conversations or when they're taking a dump, and you hear a lot of people say, "Well, you got to be able to turn these off," and then you already see cases of police brutality accusations, and the guy he turned it off before he whooped some ass. Oh, I forgot to turn it on. And I've had some people say, like, when they're dispatched, it automatically activates it. It's an automated system. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's logistical ways to make sure we get this right or wrong. But, I think that we're going to see a day where it's mandatory across the board for all police officers to have this. At least that's what I hope.
Right. And in fact, there are certain rights that somebody has after being, charged with a crime. You have the right to, if you've spoken without being told your Miranda rights, then that speaking is irrelevant, for example. Well, what I would love to see someday, and again, in addition to your right to a speedy trial and your right to remain silent and everything,
aren't those just archaic?
Day where the video is necessary.
Aren't those just? I'm sorry, I want you to repeat that because I talked over there. But aren't those just archaic notions written by a bunch of old white men a couple centuries ago? Do we really need a speedy trial or like a Fourth Amendment or a Fifth Amendment? I mean, really?
Right.
Ford? Do we need
that?
So
I know that there are some in libertarian circles who question the effectiveness of the Constitution, but personally speaking, I would consider myself a constitutionalist, or the kind of person who thinks that that's where we should start first. Okay, we have some kind of a question about politics or governance. All right, let's start and see if it's in one of those amendments before we start going, debating about anything else. And so, I do think that everything promised in the Constitution, it's not a complete list, but that's also one of the amendments. There is the amendment that says, even if we haven't said your rights right here, there are other rights you have too, and you can assume you have them. So in that sense, the Constitution is pretty complete. And I think that what's sad is that you see a lot of bending of some of those amendments, some qualifications, some changes. For example, in terms of the court system, for example, you have the right to an impartial jury, but they're starting to kind of waive that in certain settings. For example, Edward Snowden tried to say, I'll come back right now if I can get an actual public trial with a jury of my peers, and the government said no. And additionally, you have what's called, the sentencing tax, which is that, we'll let you plead down if you just plead guilty. So then they trump up the charges to begin with, which effectively is removing their right to a trial. So I think that, again, when you have more people filming and actually reporting on those things, a lot of the secrecy goes away, and then you have a lot more accountability, and people will stick a little bit more to what the Constitution actually says. And I think that's part of why the First Amendment exists. If we couldn't talk about the abuses of all of the rest of them, then there would be nothing to protect them. And I know a lot of people would probably make the same point about the Second.
Yeah, it's interesting when you see people try to make moral equivocations, and the word, that depends on what your definition of the word is. I know I do that a little bit more of with a swarmy Bush accent, but I'm sorry, I'm out of practice with my Clinton. Just this legalese, this verbal wrangling and manipulation and just bastardization of common sense stuff. It reaches a boiling point of bullshit at some point, and it has to be brought to light what's going on, and you just have to document it and let the chips fall where they may. And you brought up Snowden. I wanted to make sure we talked about this real quick. This is the day after a New York federal appeals court ruled that NSA's mass collection of telephone records is unlawful. The whistleblower responsible for bringing this program to light gave his first public reaction to the ruling at the Nordic Media Festival. Edward Snowden was interviewed, live streamed by Tor expert. Yeah, that's a good thing. But he says this is significant. The importance of it in the the U.S. legal community, the policy community, can't be overstated. This decision will not affect only the phone metadata program. It will affect every other mass surveillance program in the U.S. going forward. And, what do you make of Edward Snowden? We named him the TNAM Person of the Year. Just the fact that our Fourth Amendment has just been so violated. And they said, since back to 92 with Clinton, and then into Bush, and then into, this is nothing new, but thankfully now this is brought to light. I was wondering what your thoughts on Snowden and this transparency and all of this spying thoughts are.
So I've seen a lot. I've read a lot of stuff about him. I've seen a lot of stuff about him. I did watch the movie Citizen 4, as well as kind of all of his interviews. I think kudos to John Oliver for having one of the most interesting Edward Snowden interviews. If you ever get a chance to see
I have it, actually, and if you want to see it, I still have it, coincidentally enough. If you go to thenewamericanmedia.com on the top right of the page, it is still our featured video, because if you're not concerned about people having your dick pics you should be, and it seems like that's the one way that people go, oh yeah, oh no, that program's no good. Wait, they can just get inside of our phone and get, oh hell no. Well, hell no, they're doing it with every aspect of your life, the things you buy on your credit card, the GPS location of when you take your phone, when you go to work, when you come home. It's a creepy surveillance data grid. And I call Edward Snowden an absolute hero for letting us know about it. But yeah, you can check out the John Oliver interview in Russia with Snowden there. I thought it was hilarious, informative, and I liked how Oliver kind of pushed back on him once or twice, just kind of saying, you've let a couple things slip too that caused some damage. What do you say about it? And I like that he did that.
Right. I think that that's actually an example of the accountability stuff, which is that, Edward Snowden is human, so he even in his quest, which I certainly take him at face value that what he did was something he believed in. I truly don't agree with people who say, oh, he did it for fame or fortune or something, because I don't think that he's brought himself riches in the future. I think he's created a very, very probably anxious and insecure future due to what he did. But
anxious and insecure do you think it's a little blown out of proportion, perhaps?
So I think that the way that the international community, or I guess particularly the United States, has responded to it is probably not safe, in the sense that I think that they basically are scaring him into staying there. So I did write an article about this during my time at Fox News. I did have a semester at Fox working for Brett Baer on Special Report, and I did some articles for his blog.
Oh, that's excellent. That's fun to have that look on the inside from one of the biggest players in the game. That's great.
It was interesting, and it really was a good experience. But what I wrote about there was that what's happening with him is that he's actually trying to get back, and he does want that fair trial. He is actually prepared to answer for what he did, which is why he's not remaining anonymous, which he could. By putting a face onto it, he does create that level of accountability, which is why I do have a lot of respect for the people at the Guardian who are willing to risk their asses and end up on no-fly lists and have their significant others detained at airports and things like that.
Yeah, Glenn Greenwald,
sure
he definitely was way too close to that, and he's been messed with. And you see, actually, Mike Brown, the buddy that said he had his hands up and he was shot in the back, that turned out to be a complete lie. He just got arrested. They go after people that catch them filming. And you've seen now people that like in South Carolina, the guy that shot that footage of Walter Scott getting shot. He considered deleting it from his phone. And that's the weird spot that journalists have to put themselves in, Ford, is, we become part of the story and we don't want to be, but when you're in the middle of a melee, you have a right to defend yourself. We should go get the truth, but taking unnecessary risk. I mean, if we tell a story that people don't want to be told, people wonder still if Michael Hastings died of just an accident, or if there was something more behind it. And when the eyewitness reports say there was an explosion prior to his his car hitting a tree, and the engine went the opposite direction, about 60 yards or something like that. And he got really paranoid and was asking to switch his vehicles the day before or a couple days before. People, journalists like myself, like you, I mean, this is unfortunately something we have to think of, is what will the retaliation be? Will the IRS and Lois Lerner go after conservative groups? Well, will they go after journalists if we're telling stories they don't want to know? What if it's a slippery slope when too many people have all of our metadata, I think.
Right. So I can tell you that the practical way that impacts somebody day to day as a journalist is that a lot of the stuff we do is international. We try to talk to groups overseas, and we have communicated, for example, with the Peshmerga, which is the army that fights against ISIS locally. And a lot of that kind of communication is stuff where we are journalists, we are observers, and we are not sending aid to any group, whether it's one allied or not to the United States. But at the same time, we have a fear and many times do not make those sorts of communications because we are concerned that they will be read, and they will be either misinterpreted or just have an automated response that puts you on a no-fly list or something like that. And it is dangerous when you have people who you have a country that in a way is literally afraid to talk to each other for fear of being heard when they're doing nothing wrong. And I think what's interesting is that, again, you have people who are changing their behavior because now they actually know it to be true. Previously, to someone like Edward Snowden, if I explained, I can't, send Facebook messages to people overseas, or whatever, people might say, oh, well, you're crazy for not doing that. But now we actually have a reason, and so that kind of action is justified. And I think that, as we were talking before about the idea of activism or revolutionary action or whatever it is, people are able to act on events that have actually occurred and situations that have actually occurred when there is real accountability for it, whether that's video or whether that's somebody who has to hop on a plane, go to Hong Kong, and then say on video what's happening back in his home country.
Sure. And, a lot of people wondered about Snowden, if he's, a CIA asset, if he's a plant, if he's some sort of false flag, or he's some sort of COINTELPRO, that this is all, whether it's Reagan saying that they had satellites in space that could shoot down a laser beam like Star Wars and, convince the Russians to surrender. Who knows what's bluff and what's true, and, let's call it for what it is.
As always, not my job to speculate, but I'll go on record saying I'm pretty sure that Snowden himself is real and was acting independently of anyone. It's probably a little ridiculous to say that someone uncovering what many people would say is a conspiracy is a conspiracy.
I'll tell you what, we entertain all of these and we hash them out. I'm not saying any of these are necessarily where I've landed in concrete and said, brother, you ain't gonna change my mind on this. Sandy Hook is a hoax. I've heard it all, and certain aspects certainly make no sense to me. Sandy Hook with Robbie Parker.
Yeah.
That video specifically. Did you ever see that one? That Robbie Parker? He was the guy that came out, and he's laughing his ass off, and then he looks over, he goes, oh shit, the deer in headlights look, and then he takes 3 deep breaths, getting into character, and then in front of the cameras, because they were a little too soon with going live, he says, my name is Robbie Parker. And he goes from laughing hysterical. Anyway, there's weird things that don't necessarily lead me to believe Sandy Hook never happened or kids never died. It's like you hear every conspiracy theory ever, and I just entertain it, and I listen, and I encourage the conversations, But, I mean, Edward Snowden, it's just weird that if Edward Snowden is exposing the bad stuff that our government is doing, trashing our Fourth Amendment God-given protections to privacy. Let's just dumb it down even further. We have the right to be left alone and for our info to be private, unless there's a judge that has compelling data to give them a reason to start snooping around. Look, if the U.S. government is now the bad guys, what does that say about Russia and Putin being the good guys now, and we're supposed to believe John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Nancy Pelosi and Barbara Boxer, there's chemical weapons in Syria. This global political thing that I see, Ford, how intertwined is it all? Do you think everything is connected to everything else, or there literally are just, how much influence does the U.S. foreign policy play on these global stage,
So I think that again, that was a really that was a pretty far-reaching and abstract question. Is it all connected? In a sense, I mean, I think that the United States has a role, maybe that it's created for itself, or maybe that the world has let it create, which is that it tries to be the leader of planet Earth in some way, or the world's police in some way, and I think that basically everything that happens in the world economy either impacts us or is something that we have impacted. I think that U.S. To Russia, U.S. to Middle East, U.S. to China, foreign relations are incredibly kind of impactful on the world stage. But I wouldn't see there as being a false dichotomy that says, if the U.S. is abusing its citizens' civil rights, for example, then that makes Russia the good guy. I think that, a lot of these things are happening in other countries, and you actually fall into sort of a Cold War tactic that was occurring where there was basically a ton of yeah but isms where, Russia, we'd point out something wrong with Soviet Russia, and they'd say, yeah, but look at the United States has this, and this example. And right now, what you see is actually Russian state media, RT, Russia Today, has their America, division, and those guys actually do a lot of good work reporting on the field about what is happening in America. They put out videos of cops pepper spraying and macing, beating protesters and things like that.
Because they want America to look as bad as possible, so they actually do a great job of uncovering corruption, but they don't like us so much, so they're technically the enemy, except if the enemy is our good guy protecting Snowden, who is the bad guy here? It gets so convoluted.
But at the same time, the Kremlin is the Russians are not like these pillars of civil rights that respect their first, second, every other.
Who was that girl band, Pussy Riot, that was arrested because they didn't like them?
I was just about to say that they jailed a band for having a lewd performance in front of a church, which is exactly what we would consider to be a First Amendment protected thing, where if there was an arrest for something like that, it would just be considered preposterous and struck down. And
that's like Salem witch trial stuff from like the 1600s and like the early colonies. Like, oh, we gotta get these people. It's like, dude, it's 2015. We don't have to love everything everybody else is doing.
Right, exactly. So the point being there that we can. If the American government's doing things that we're dissatisfied with, we shouldn't assume that other countries are necessarily better in some way, or if those countries are creating accountability for our country, that doesn't mean that they're the top of it. I just heard on
nicely
Fox
said
the other day that the United Nations, including a panel that has Saudi Arabia in it, is investigating the United States for Baltimore. For the way that Baltimore has been responded to. Literally a country that beheads women who commit adultery.
No, who are just accused, Baltimore. Who are just pointed at and accused of committing it. No evidence of it. It literally is Salem witch trial. I think he's a homo. We can kill them in Saudi. I don't know why I gave him a stupid, dumbass Southern accent there, but that's what they do. They accuse them of homosexual.
Sounds like, or the language they speak.
Dramatization may have sounded different. Yeah, but Saudi Arabia being asked to judge anything is that's a huge red flag. They have no ground to stand on. And yeah, you said it very correctly. And I don't mean to say that that's what I think, because Snowden is helping we the people. He has to flee to Russia, so that makes Russia the good guys. No. It's just I'm basically getting at how convoluted and confusing and overlapped and backwards so much of this stuff is. And frankly, I think it's the double, triple, and quadruple crossing of our foreign policy that's got us so intertwined in so many places. Like, look at ISIS. We literally don't know who the bad guys are, and we're giving them weapons. Or we're intentionally doing that to stir up the next world war. Which one is it?
Probably the first one. but if somebody presents me with video evidence, mind you, I'll be the first to talk about it.
Oh, you know what? Let me refer you then. My buddy, somebody that I've interviewed in person and had on the show a couple times, Ben Swan. He works over. I don't know if you know him or not, but he works over at Russia Today a little bit and does his own thing. Check out his Origins of ISIS video. I think we had that as our maybe right before Snowden. We had the Origins of ISIS by Ben Swan as our featured video up there. And I'll tell you what, it's a pretty comprehensive report, documented. Kind of showing who funded who and where the U.S. money and dollars went to and what we were trying to do and what got thwarted and where we are now. It's pretty damning and it's pretty confusing. But once again, I think all we can do is we can document everything everywhere and put the puzzle pieces together. And I think that's why it's very important for all of the alternative media to be out there gathering the stories like you're doing with News to Share. I just want to touch on this. We're getting ready to wrap this up here. But did you have any comments on the use of drones? Because I know that was another thing that started happening is, Anwar al-Awlaki and a lot of people now are having problems with drones coming on their personal property, and then people are seeing them on the streets of Baltimore. How do you see the role of drones, and if you want to expand that into other advancing technologies. How do you see that playing into our Fourth Amendment protections and practical policing, and if there's any overlap into military applications where there should be a distance?
Sure. So I think that what's interesting about my views, at least for foreign policy in terms of drone killings, is that I basically hold the same standard for drone killing as they have on paper in the U.S. government. The problem is that they generally don't follow what they have on paper. Their regulation for, okay, can we kill this person overseas is you have to prove that the person is an imminent threat, meaning if we don't kill them right now, then something's going to happen. You have to prove that the damage of shooting off the drone is going to be less than the damage that would happen if you didn't do it. And you also have to prove that there is no alternative that would also lead to less damage. So basically, you have to prove that you're using a drone is going to end up with less lives lost. And although that's supposed to be what's going on, it's just totally, like, objectively, it's just not accurate. They do not have that level of accountability.
It's a video game too. I mean, it's 20-year-olds playing a video game. They're watching something on a screen. They get told, you do this, they do it, but were the proper channels followed to get to that trigger point? Who can tell, Right.
So when we get to the U.S., though, and we talk about domestic drones, I think I'd probably point to my buddy Rand Paul, who I actually did meet at Fox and did have the opportunity to film at CPAC, who has spoken a lot about the issue of the potential for domestic drones to be a problem. Would we ever authorize a person to be extrajudicially killed by a drone strike on American land? And that hasn't happened yet. However, we do see drones spying on people from here, and that's not like a secret. I did find out pretty soon after my last day in Baltimore that there were drones flying above Baltimore, basically watching the protesters. And being in Baltimore, it was interesting because there was so much more surveillance than actual effect. Several police helicopters circling every single sect of the.
Hang on, Ford. Let me jump in. Go back about 2 sentences and say that again, because as we're talking about surveillance, you got some awesome, crazy glitches through our connection, and I love to point that. I mean, it happens when John B. Wells is on our program. What did he tell me? The one time he was on the CIA website, like the hour earlier, I'm like, thanks, you left radioactive breadcrumbs leading back to my network. Thank you, John. But, sometimes when we talk about things, kind of important things, and I'm not the only radio host that said this, it's really awkward when the listener can listen. You'll hear it on there. It's all glitched up. I want you to kind of reset the point you were making there, because I lost about 2 or 3 sentences due to electronic garble.
All right, sure. I will... Notwithstanding the implication that somehow, anything but just a simple error. So what I was basically saying is that, so there's all of that stuff happening overseas. What we're seeing nowadays is that there are drones being used for surveillance in the United States, and that's not a secret. It's very hard to actually tell when they're happening. You can't look out your window and see it above you because they're so high flying. But it's not a secret, and they did release the information saying that in Baltimore they were using drones to basically watch the protesters happening. So while you have local PD and National Guard on the ground there, you had federal surveillance drones, not unlike what you'd see in Afghanistan, watching what's happening on the streets in Baltimore. And what's interesting about that is that assuming that those never use their weapons on American soil, and I don't think that they would actually strike Baltimore, for example. They're just watching, but they're not actually doing anything to defend the businesses there. The same was kind of true one level lower, where when I was kind of in the midst of filming the night riots 2 weeks ago, they're destroying businesses and stuff. You had police that were basically blocking off specific roads, but watching with their own eyes as these people broke into businesses and ran out with cell phones and stuff, and the police didn't stop them. And you had helicopters doing the same thing, just circling around, watching. In some ways, it was kind of ominous to see all of that stuff happening, and these people just breaking in and taking things, and the police just observing.
Do you attribute that to the mayor telling them, like, verbatim, stand down, it's only property, and we gave the rioters space to destroy? I think this is a legitimate strategy employed by some, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous.
So I'm sort of conflicted on that because I did watch the quote, the original thing she said in context, where she said we gave people room to peacefully protest, and then they created destruction, and we gave them room to do that too.
Space to destroy, I believe, was close to it. Yeah. Right.
So the thing I think what she was basically trying to say, and I give her, I think that she handled the whole thing very poorly, but I do want to note that on that exact quote, I think what she was trying to say is that in protecting free speech, she also had the unintended consequence of protecting the violence that was happening. I personally think it's probably not that quote, but the overall strategy that they had, which was protect government buildings and protect rich streets rather than protect businesses, that ended up with a lot more destruction than there should have been. And kind of an endorsement of perhaps a political position or whatever, but I do think that it shows the need for private security or even private militias such as the Oath Keepers in Ferguson did a lot to defend businesses where police kind of had holes in their defense. The police were generally there to make arrests, watch what's happening, and in some ways contain it. But when people are breaking into 7-Eleven, the police aren't running into the 7-Eleven into a bunch of 20 of these guys and trying to arrest them. It's basically just not possible.
Yeah,
they don't have a stake in it. The police have no financial incentive to stop a business from being raided.
Well, and it was ruled that police don't have an obligation to protect and serve. I forget what case that was. That one came down, I don't know, what was it, a year ago? And, on top of it, I don't know. I'm still trying to get information on the Freddie Gray case. I find it, one, hard to believe there's not a camera in the back of their paddy wagon. And two, I don't know. I didn't see him get killed there. It gets really weird trying to sort this stuff out because, yes, in the grand scheme of things, property is not as important as life. But on the other hand, you feel like things are either out of control or being steered behind the scenes. And there have been accusations about certain funding for certain groups to, the Tea Party came up, and then the Tea Party was co-opted by the Koch brothers. And then Occupy Wall Street came up, and that was a part of George Soros and other groups funding that. And you just kind of have to step back in these situations and look at it and try to understand, is this organic? Is this being steered in a certain direction? And you referenced earlier about, certain groups maybe passing out literature, the word revolution and this, that, and the other, and we saw that at Occupy when we covered that a few years ago as well. Do you feel like there are groups, whether it's George Soros funded or other groups that you're aware of, do you feel like there's an invisible hand steering? Because I've been very critical of Al Sharpton, Eric Holder, Barack Obama going after the Trayvon thing, going after the Mike Brown thing, going after the Baltimore thing, and stirring up racial hatred where you're seeing a lot of black on white race crimes to make up for. You saw the cops executed, right in front of face to face, pulls up, just shoots him dead right in the face, and on his Facebook he says, "I'm gonna go make some pigs fly today. Rest in peace, Eric Garner." There's 100 of these things. I can't even name them off the top of my head. But do you feel like these things are organically springing up, or that our community organizer president is intentionally fanning the flames of racism for whatever political gains? Because I've kind of reached that conclusion personally. And I'm just curious how you feel this is being steered, or if it's completely organic.
I think that when you say completely organic, that's sort of a loaded sentence, because at the same time you said invisible hand, and so speaking as a capitalism loving American here, I personally worship the invisible hand, so to speak, of the economy, and that's not in dollars necessarily, but that can also mean in ideas. For me, I don't think that there's a violation of rights going on when a non-governmental entity of some kind is trying to advocate some position or another. I personally completely disagree with socialism, for example, but I don't have any problem with them trying to use these situations to persuade people, at least in a sense of, do they have the right to do it or not? Are they probably putting people into a situation where their anger is misplaced? Absolutely, yeah. When you say that capitalism killed Freddie Gray, you're just wrong. It's just objectively wrong. But maybe you're influencing minds like that. But I think that it just creates greater obligation to have conversations that really address the problems and say them correctly. If you do disagree with those people, talk about it, as we're doing right now. If you disagree with Al Sharpton, go talk about it on a radio show. So in a way, but I wouldn't express what you're doing as manipulating your viewers. It's entirely organic, or it's the invisible hand, and that people have ideas and people have opposing ideas, and as they talk about them, those ideas spread when they're persuasive. But what I think is dangerous is when you have government officials basically speaking out of their particular place. I do think that it's dangerous when you have, for example, a federal official of some kind, such as Barack Obama, talking about what is inherently something that was local, such as
the Cambridge police acted stupidly. It's not my job to weigh in on these things, but the Cambridge police acted stupidly. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. Severe racial inequities in Ferguson. And it's just like, God, can you just get the facts and calm things down? Can you be a uniter instead of a Molotov cocktail thrower? Like this I'm just so disappointed in this president not being able to calm people down, gather the facts and data. It's like, it's just Molotov cocktail throwing. He's the exact opposite of what I was hoping he was capable of, being half black and half white. It's like, who better to speak on this and calm us and unite our nation? He's a divider, in my opinion, and every opportunity he gets, that's how I see it, and I just get so sad. There's so much wasted opportunity, in my opinion. I'm sorry, I just had to get that out.
So if I had my perfect government, I could give the Ron Swanson definition of a perfect government, which is, we just have one guy who sits at a desk and all he gets to decide is who to nuke, and women are brought to him when he desires them, and that's the whole government. My perfect federal government probably wouldn't have a president who's trying to address those things, but instead leaves it to actual, nonprofits, activists, things like that try to take that role. And I think that allows you to have a really constructive dialogue. When you have someone like Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson or whatever, who many would perceive as inflaming racial violence or something like that, those people are on equal ground. They don't have the ability to use force. They have the ability to use their words and organize things and stuff like that. But they're on equal ground to anybody else who wants to organize a counter protest or write against, why they're wrong and things like that. And so I think that allows you to have level ground. The problem with having a president and expecting them to, whether it's unite people or divide people or express opinions or something like that, is you can't argue. You can't argue with him. There is a level of compulsion associated with somebody in the highest office of government that cannot be matched by any nonprofit. If the president says this is the way it is or whatever, he's just one human who has his own opinion, but there is nobody whose opinion will be able to match it in terms of persistence. So when he either fans the fires or tries to extinguish them or whatever, you don't have that same level of accountability, pushback, debate that you can have in a non-governmental, nonprofit kind of sense.
Maybe that's where we need Vladimir Putin. Dun dun dun. Make him a comic book hero or something. The antithesis of everything Obama. And the reason why we name the show Agree to Disagree is, we don't have to agree on 100% of the issues. I will change my mind on some things. I won't agree with myself from week to week if I gather more information, become more enlightened, hopefully a little less stupid. But I think lacking a solid conversation when you can have a variance of ideas and you don't have to pretend that you agree, That's why we called it Agree to Disagree. And when we see things like this escalating where Spike Lee tweets out the address of George Zimmerman incorrectly, and these elderly people are getting harassed, and there are people, saying, let's go kill him. It's like, man, when the lynch mob comes out, this is not good. This is not our system. It's not supposed to be a lynch mob, burn it down mentality. You saw the stepfather from Michael Brown say, burn this bitch down, burn this bitch down. And then the riot happened, and that's exactly what happened. It was burned down. And it's just, I feel like, I don't care. The rhetoric's high and it's heated, that's fine. But it's a disservice to our First Amendment when everything gets violent, in my opinion, because I think the conversation is lost. I can't support the violence when there's any other option available, and that just gets tough for me. And where it got tough for you the other night, I want to wrap it up on this, Ford. The NDAA implications of how you're being detained. Maybe if you could just talk for a minute about how you connected with Dan Johnson and Solutions Institute, what you know about the NDAA, and then kind of how that relates back to when you had your incident in Baltimore, the knowledge base you already brought to it, and how you feel about it afterward.
So to rewind to the beginning of the question, so Daniel Johnson is still the founder, but used to lead the organization called PANDA, which is People Against the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA. And basically the NDAA, among other things, was a bill that was signed into law by Bush and has been renewed through to the Obama administration and is still in effect today. And in theory, its primary thing was to basically fund various military law enforcement kind of stuff. But and there are people more suited to talk about this stuff. But the major provision that it granted that civil liberties activists take issue to is that it basically granted the right for law enforcement to call anybody a suspected terrorist without having to prove probable cause, and then detain them for as long as they want without ever charging them.
Yep.
So basically, indefinite detainment was the major issue there, and although the NDAA is not often cited in specific instances where that happened, for instance, in Chicago, there were two activists who were arrested and held for over 48 hours with none of their, no phone number, no record of it. They weren't able to make phone calls out, so basically nobody knew where they were. And in theory, they could have been held, up to and including their death, right? They could just be held forever without being charged. And in some ways, this has been used to justify, for example, Guantanamo Bay, where you can indefinitely detain them on suspicion of terrorism without ever proving that they've done anything criminal. The implications of it, although I actually heard that the indefinite detention clause is either in debate or has actually been removed now, but don't quote me.
No, but that's something. How about this? No quote, but how about we all do some research into that, see if we can. Because I'll tell you what, I haven't heard about it till you just said it, and you're not certain of it, so we should dig in there and get an answer. I like that.
Yeah, I think I read on a source that I would not consider necessarily reputable that the clause was actually removed, but it would need to, or that it was deemed unconstitutional and now has to be removed or something like that. So that I would invite anybody listening to look up the exact state of that right now. But the wider implication is that it basically allows any law enforcement official who's aware of it to detain anybody, and they could basically say, I think this person is terroristic, and there's not real, and that's a very broad sentence, right?
Intentionally broad, right?
Basically, they could detain anybody who is in effect bothering them in some way, and say he is a terrorist, or I suspected him of being a terrorist, which is why I was able to detain him forever. And the way that could be bad is that and this has happened, is that activists, for example, can be detained indefinitely and without charge, and that's very potentially dangerous. And also, it's the exact opposite of what the Constitution says, which is that A, you have the right to a speedy trial, and B, You have the right to know what you're being charged with, and then face a jury over it. And you have the right to face your accuser. If you haven't been accused, you can't face your accuser.
Right.
So there's a lot of constitutional issues at check there. So I would encourage anybody listening to this to look that up or check out Panda Unite or Panda United or something like that on Facebook.
Yeah, I think it's pandaunite.org. I'm going to double check it now.
Right.
Okay, that's the dead air where it's called host is checking something online and cannot multitask. Thank you very much. Yes, it's pandaunite.org. Take back your city from NDAA indefinite detention. But I guess then your experience, as much as you wanted to wrap it up, then how it played out. I'm trying to dance around the best way. Okay, in any way you want to connect these two things forward. Your experience as your Baltimore situation wrapped up in the situation you're still resolving versus what you knew about the NDAA. How do you feel you were treated, if you can go that far?
Sure. Okay. So in the video you can see that I was detained, and then they basically said out loud that it was for curfew violation, and then they changed it to disorderly conduct, basically upon realizing that they weren't allowed to charge media with the first one. So in theory, under the NDAA, if a journalist, so setting up a fictional situation here, but if a journalist were to be detained under the NDAA, there actually isn't an obligation to have any charge if the officer basically uses the words, I think that he's promoting terrorism in some way, whether that be, he's filming he's filming us as we fight back against these protesters, and we think the protesters are terrorists, and that makes the journalist a terrorist, or whatever. Under the NDAA, anybody, including somebody who's a member of the media or an activist or a street medic, could be detained indefinitely. And that could mean that that could mean years, or that could mean that they're taken out of it for as long as it matters, right? If you have a protest that's going on for a week, and on the first day of that, some journalists or something like that, or we'll use the street medic example, and they detain a street medic and say, I think that you're acting kind of terroristy. They hold them for a whole week, and without charge, and as long as they say, we think he's a terrorist, they're legally justified in doing so. And the consequence would be that you'd have a whole week during which that protest is going on and people are getting hurt, and that street medic's not able to help them. And that could be applied to, peaceful protesters who are helping to stop it, or even journalists who are helping to record it. And so the issue of indefinite detention, although a lot of it is, this is theoretically what could happen and we need to restrain it before it does, or it's happening and we're not that aware of it, that's sort of the reason that people are fighting it, to stop that kind of injustice from occurring.
It is. It gets intense out there. Like I said, I went out to Las Vegas to the Bundy Ranch, and I saw, got all these interviews from all the key players. I just wanted to get their side of the story because this thing was about to go down, and I knew something was off. And it was the next day that it happened. I had a wedding to go to, so I didn't make it down there for it. But I mean, it was something out of a Wild West movie with a bunch of cowboys riding up on horses and people coming out there and guns drawn and this tense standoff and the BLM backed. I mean, damn, could you imagine your management company or HOA or apartment building or something that armed to the teeth and aiming weapons at you because they're managing, that's their style? It's just really weird and tense, and it's just something that, I'm interested in getting as much information on as possible because I have a hunch Ferguson and Baltimore are not the only places we're going to see this pop off, and I think there is coordination. I'm not sure exactly to what extent and what the ultimate goal is yet, but it's something I think we should all be concerned about. Hence, I recommend that people get prepared just for any sort of thing, any sort of natural disaster, any sort of earthquake or volcano eruption or tsunami, or, things happen all the time. Maybe you're in Baltimore and you can't make it to the store. Do you have an extra medication refill of your meds, or some bottles of water if the water pipes get. You just never know. So I recommend preparedness in general, and I think part of that is just to try to look at Baltimore and figure out what we could learn. And I guess that would be my last question for you, Ford. What should we learn from Baltimore? What do we need to be taken away? Whether we paid attention to this every day, a little bit, or almost nothing at all. What should we learn from this?
I think that what's interesting to learn from it is how to respond, first of all, peacefully, and that if your problem that you're fighting against is police violence, then acting with violence tends to, first of all, delegitimize your point of view and distract from the activism you're trying to do, right? Instead of Barack Obama coming out and calling them thugs, right? Not that I think he should have been involved at all, but he could have come out and at least said, we hear you. So basically, violence is bad. Violence is never going to help your activism, and once you descend into violence, you're really not even in activism anymore. You're not in the realm of activism. But also that doing violence is going to cause those problems to be exacerbated. If you are upset about police oppressing you with their guns, with their hands, with their whatever, then if you're going out there and doing violence, then you're going to cause a curfew, which is going to criminalize all of you, or basically any kind of all of the civil rights abuses that happen there. And that's not to say that these protesters are responsible for that, or that those things were justified because of that. But generally speaking, violence begets more violence, and I think that we did see that in Baltimore. And I think not enough people are talking about the fact, not just these people did bad things by looting, rioting, and whatever, but that has a effect of instigating more violence. And I think it makes it more likely that when the next Ferguson or Baltimore happens, and I do think that that's going to occur, I think it's not unlikely that we'll see some other city descend into destroying itself. And I think that because we've seen Ferguson and Baltimore, we've had this pretty negative lesson of, we might get social change if we destroy our city. And I think it's dangerous because you're going to see that more. So what people might be learning from it is, we need more violence to solve the problems. What I think they should learn from it is we need to make absolute sure from the beginning when something like this happens that we respond, but we respond nonviolently.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just saw this meme, and this is something we could leave it open-ended for people to leave their comments, but this meme is kind of it's a long one, but it's interesting, at least this person's take. It says, "Blacks riot, destroying black businesses after black guy dies in police custody because of 3 black officers in 43% black police department under a black female mayor with a black female state attorney in a city ruled by Democrats for over 50 years. So the first black female U.S. attorney appointed by the first black president blames racism." And, I want everybody. I live in an area of Los Angeles, you could call it a black area and you wouldn't be incorrect. Good people are good people. Cool people are cool people, and I just don't want to see everything through a racial lens. I don't want to accept blame when I have nothing to do with it on behalf of my race or my sex or any of that stuff. And I don't think black people should be blamed for certain things just on their appearance and how they look. And I'm so tired in 2015 of playing these games back and forth, and the people, the in-between moneymakers, the Sharptons and the community organizers that's how claims are made, and that's how money is given, that's how power is obtained, by scaring the other side into silence and submission. I think you and I could definitely agree that peaceful protest is something that is just a beautiful gift to this country, and it's something required when we see injustice. I think it might also be possible, now I'm going a little bit further back on my percent, the percentage that I'm confident you and I agree, but I'm pretty close, pretty sure that we're going to be close on this. It's staying peaceful is the way that you get your message out the best way. Something that you saw and something that we all watched on TV. it sure delegitimizes a movement when it moves to rioting, because then you can have America go, hey, agree or disagree with whatever you want. You have no right to knock over that guy's shoe store and take all of his product. You have no right to assault that guy in the street over nothing. And you don't have the right to burn down that building. That could be attached to an apartment complex. Like nobody has the right to be that violent at all. And I want to see all movements kind of preach what you were just saying there, is the peaceful, don't block the roads, don't set things on fire, don't attack people. This is common sense stuff. But I hope that the peaceful conversations and the petitions for redress of grievances with their governments, I want to see that, and I really don't want to see any more of these shenanigans across the country. But I definitely want to hold any rogue police officers accountable. I want to roll back this surveillance state a little bit, and I certainly don't want to see things get really bad. I'm definitely hoping for the best, while maybe I'm a little bit more pessimistic than some. I'll rephrase that question because I connected it to too many other things before, Ford. Are you optimistic or pessimistic that we're moving in the right direction in about a minute here?
I'm optimistic that we have the potential to move in the right direction.
Fair.
And I'm not sure yet whether we will or not, but I think we have the tools to do so.
All right, I like it. I would agree with that as well. So, hey, Ford, I appreciated the talk. This was a good chance. Working with Solutions Institute, we team up with other activists, and we just kind of try to help each other out. Be a sounding board, a central gathering place of ideas and assistance and collaboration, and it's a really fun group. They have ActCon 2 coming up soon. Any final words on your experience with Solutions Institute yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So what I think is interesting about Solutions Institute is that we have a variety of people who are able to advise on activism from within all kinds of different walks of life that are related to it. And so we have a lot of people who do radio, right? I don't own a radio show, but I speak on them, so I could talk to people about being a guest on a radio station, whereas you are more likely to talk to them about how to have one. And I think additionally, someone like me who is an advisor to it, I myself am not an activist, but I film a lot of activism, and I have a lot of insights on how the media sees activism and how you can create video of your activism. So you can go to solutions-institute.org and basically get help from whoever is the most relevant. And, if you are an activist who's seasoned and done all this stuff and needs help with a specific thing, or you literally have no idea what to do, there's basically, no matter what you're looking to do, there's going to be someone there who's able to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an interesting ride so far. I helped put together ActCon 1. I stepped aside for ActCon 2. I think Bobby Rodrigo is still working on that. A lot of good people. Stuart Rhodes, founder of Oath Keepers, is going to be there. So go check out their website, solutions-institute.org, and sign up for their online activist training convention Saturday, May 16th. You just do it online. It's a week away. Stuart Rhodes, founder of Oath Keepers, along with a whole bunch of other people. Justin King, who was on the show recently. So yeah, go check that out. Ford, last 30 seconds, give out your sites one more time so people can stay connected with you.
Sure. So my name is Ford Fischer, and my website is news2share.com. You can find me on Twitter at Ford, F-O-R-D, Fischer, F-I-S-C-H-E-R. Don't forget the C. And on Twitter at news_2_share.
Excellent. Hey, man, I really appreciate it. I think we will extend the open-ended invite. If you ever had something you really wanted to get out there, just feel free to not hesitate contacting us for that, Ford. I had a great time with you on the program. Sure. And we'll definitely be here if you get some more of that great footage. Go check out his footage. I'm telling you, it's like something you'd see in one of these new Xbox games, and it's like urban combat, and you're running along with the SWAT team. It's freaking intense. Go check it out. Ford, thank you so much for your time and joining us over here on Agree to Disagree. And for everybody out there listening, thank you very much. Check out our homepage, thenewamericanmedia.com, youtube.com/thenewamericanmedia, American_media_, and on Facebook. Take care. Love y'all. Peace.
Hi, everybody. You're listening to Agree to Disagree with Brian Engelman, and this is John B. Wells reminding you that not only is Brian Engelman a cool guy, and not only is the newamericanmedia.com a very cool platform, but here's a cool idea for you, too. Are you alone? Not really. Do you like dogs? Do you like cats? You do. Of course you do. Everybody does. One or the other, maybe even both. You know, there are a lot of dogs and cats that are at shelters right now, and if somebody doesn't take them home, they're going to wind up euthanized. That's a nice way of saying they're going to be killed because there's simply not enough room. I guarantee it, the best dogs and the best cats, the best pets come from shelters. There's something about dogs and cats. They know. They know where they are. You walk through one of them, and certainly at least one is going to look at you and go, I wish you'd take me home. I'm in hell. Please take me out of here. It'll be the best thing that you ever did for your soul. You'll feel good about it. And not only that, but you have a friend for life. Doesn't matter if you got money, you don't have money. Well, it doesn't make any difference to a dog or cat. All they need is the sound of your voice and maybe even the stroke of your hand, and they're fine. Maybe a little food every once in a while. The sweetest sound that those pets ever hear is your voice. Think it over and adopt a cat or a dog from a local shelter today. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did.